Welcome, welcome everyone to our special online Earth Day event, and happy continuing Earth Day to you all. My name is Lynn Stoddard. I'm the Executive Director of Sustainable CT. We're really excited to be hosting this and that you're all with us. Super honored to have three very special guests, starting with Brenda Mallory, the Chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. She will be followed by Congresswoman Jahana Hayes of Connecticut's 5th Congressional District, and then Senator Blumenthal will be rounding out the discussion today. And we're also excited to have all of you in the audience. We had just under 200 people register for this event, which is great. Lots of strong Connecticut representation. Special welcome to members of U.S. House of Representatives and Connecticut General Assembly reps who had signed up. We also have, just so you know who's in the room, we have lots of folks from Connecticut towns across the state, municipal elected officials, staffers, residents who are on town sustainability teams, some of our sustainable CT funders, and we have lots of our strong partners from that work on sustainable CT with us across the state, the Council of Governments, partners in state and federal agencies, and nonprofits. So the goal of today is to amplify the conversation around sustainable practices and environmental stewardship in celebration of Earth Day. And we're excited to get some insights from these three esteemed leaders in the field. This is how it's going to run. Each of our guests will make some remarks, followed by a chance for me to answer some questions that you've submitted in advance. So we will start with you, Chair Mallory. Once again, thank you so much for joining us and making the time. Brenda Mallory is a distinguished environmental policy expert and advocate, currently serving as chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. She's also a native of Waterbury, so we're happy to welcome her home virtually on this occasion. Chair Mallory brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to her position with a robust background in environmental law and policy, and we're so honored to have her here today to discuss the Biden-Harris administration's approach to improving, preserving, and protecting America's public health and environment. Welcome again. So would you like to start out just sharing a little bit about your role in the work of the CEQ, and then we can jump into some questions?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here. CEQ, the Council on Environmental Quality, is the environmental office within the White House. It was created as part of the National Environmental Policy Act in 1970, and so has served over the 50+ years as an anchor for organizing and coordinating environmental policy across the federal government. Of course, over that time, there are other entities now in the White House who also have various roles that relate to the environment. So there's a lot of kind of partnering and collaboration that occurs all across the executive branch and all across the executive office of the president as well. I thought I would spend just a few minutes talking a little bit about some of the specific actions that the administration has been taking, particularly on climate change, environmental justice, conservation. You know, this is a president who by far has had the most ambitious agenda when it comes to climate change, environmental justice, conservation, and sustainability. And so over the course of the 3 years that he has been in office and that we've been here, a lot has happened to really push those areas forward. But let me stop before I kind of jump into some of the details. I do want to just acknowledge Senator Blumenthal, who I know you're going to be speaking to, and Senator Blumenthal is such a great partner in Connecticut on the administration's efforts to realize President Biden's kind of climate change agenda. And, you know, personally, he is the person who introduced me to the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee for my confirmation hearing, and so has a special place in a key milestone in my being in this current role. And similarly, I also just excited to be on the similar platform with Congresswoman Hayes, who as Lynn was saying, also from Waterbury, a homegirl from Waterbury. I've had the opportunity to actually be with her. Previously, I traveled to Connecticut in her district to highlight a significant award for clean school buses that was being made, $8 million. So a lot of connection between the two folks that you have also speaking today. As someone who grew up in a family and in a community of working people in Waterbury, it's been really an honor for me to work for a president and vice president who have made achieving sort of an equitable approach to how we address our environmental and climate change problems, such a central feature of his agenda. And so, being able to both help in the construction of the activities that are so important to our meeting the challenge that we face today under their leadership when it comes to climate change, conservation, sustainability, and environmental justice is just really a true honor. And I think one of the things that's a really important part of the activities that I've been involved in and that I think the administration is taking kind of writ large is the notion and recognition that working with communities all across the country and with community leaders who know their states and who know their communities and who understand like what's really necessary in order to help tackle some of these problems. And so I'm just grateful for the kind of partnerships that we have had with folks all across the country, but in particular with folks in Connecticut. These challenges that we're facing with climate change in particular are just unprecedented. I mean, we are every day seeing new evidence of the kind of both the frequency and the ferocious nature of some of these events that weather events that are occurring all across the country, and needing really new strategies and new approaches to deal with them. But those approaches really do need to be more coordinated as we figure out how to work together. Just thinking about this past weekend, it was sort of devastation in Oklahoma that got all the attention, right? It feels like there's always some really, historic, event that's occurring that, touches on things like hurricanes and floods and power outages, or it's the persistence of things like drought that we are all kind of working to deal with. And these are the kinds of events that I think we both have to prepare ourselves for and get ready to deal with them, but also we've got to be working on the kind of core issues that are necessary to reduce the carbon in the atmosphere and to get us to a point where we can avoid some of the worst impacts that we will see if we are not successful in decarbonizing our environment. And a key point that I think we emphasize a lot in this administration is just that we know that extreme weather events and the climate crisis in general disproportionately affects communities who are often those that are least able to prepare for and to recover from those disasters. And so a lot of our work has really been focused on unleashing the power that the President's Investing in America agenda has really allowed in ways that actually not only try to help the whole country, but also are very mindful of that some communities are going to need more help than others. The Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest investment in clean energy, environmental justice, and climate change ever, is really a central feature of the President's Investing in America agenda. And in signing that law into effect, we really redefined, this country's sort of leadership and how we go about confronting the threat of the climate crisis. And so it really sets up like a new era of both American innovation and ingenuity. And the Inflation Reduction Act really combined with the bipartisan infrastructure law, which had been enacted the year before, really is giving us tools to tackle things like the cleanup of legacy pollution, kind of improving water infrastructure, addressing local environmental and health hazards, and expanding our access to nature, all of which are important features to getting us ready to not only meet the climate change moment, but to do it in ways that sort of create a new clean energy economy around the new opportunities that are presented by the ways in which we decarbonize our environment. And so I think all of these efforts and many of the investments already kind of reaching people in Connecticut, a few that I'll touch on. I mentioned earlier being in Connecticut to announce the clean school buses. These are buses that are rolling out in the communities already, not only in Connecticut, but across the country, and focused on obviously helping to ensure that kids, have cleaner air to breathe, that they can go to school and in better health, and helping to promote better health in neighborhoods overall. We're enabling the installation of solar power in Bridgeport public schools. And this will provide clean, reliable, affordable energy for this community, thanks to a $3.6 million investment from the President's bipartisan infrastructure law. We're also supporting the cleanup of the Webster Street lot in Norwalk, where an old manufacturing plant had been contaminated on this 5-acre site. So those are a couple of specific examples in Connecticut, but really kind of across the country, there are similar types of activities that are occurring. And I think we're pleased with the progress, but there's so much more to do that we're working kind of towards continuing to advance on the opportunities that are presented by the President's Investing in America agenda. But I would say, in addition to being proud of kind of that we're, how we're able to make progress, I think it's really important that we're doing this in ways that, recognize that that not all communities have historically been received the benefits of federal programs in the past. And so the environmental justice agenda is very central to the work that we're doing, and is really just based on a kind of a core belief, I think, both of the President and the Vice President, that every person deserves clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. And from the first week in office, the President kind of created the framework to actually, require the federal government to kind of focus on how you make sure that communities that have historically been underinvested in or are marginalized actually get the benefits. And an initiative called the Justice 40 initiative is a key element of that work. Justice 40 basically sets a goal that the overall benefits of certain federal climate, clean energy, affordable and sustainable housing, that those benefits actually reach disadvantaged communities. And so right now there are about 518 or so programs across the federal government that are under the Justice 40 framework, where this 40% goal is front of mind as we think about how we're deploying the dollars, how we sort of structure it in ways to make sure that that's a consideration for the agencies. But in addition to kind of these historic investments, we're also, as an administration, focused on things like strengthening the kind of key pollution standards. These are all important as we think not only about climate change and reducing greenhouse gases, but also the co-benefits that go along with some of those changes. So to realize kind of a future where everyone has clean air to breathe, EPA finalized stronger clean air standards for chemical plants. To better protect communities from cancer risk, we implemented a historic ban on some of the few remaining uses of asbestos. And to realize a future where everyone has clean water to drink, we are replacing lead pipes within a 10-year period where we set the first national standard to address PFAS in drinking water and launched a national campaign to conserve and restore our rivers and our streams and wetlands. And then to create a healthier and safer environment, we're kind of unleashing historic funding to clean up abandoned oil and gas wells, orphaned coal mines, and other contaminated sites like Superfund sites. So these are just a few examples of how President Biden is deploying like a whole of government approach. You probably have heard us say that, but it's all across the government, really using the tools that each of the agencies have to help tackle the climate crisis and advance environmental justice. And although, again, we've made a lot of progress, I think that it's really important that we kind of work together across the country in order to have kind of a sustained and unified effort towards bringing about the change that we know is necessary to meet the climate crisis, but the other issues that we're also addressing. So, you know, these are not issues that the federal government can solve by itself. And that's why it's so important that we have like partnerships across the country, partnerships with organizations like yours and your members, where collectively we are looking at ways in which we can, you know, meet the challenges of climate change of the moment and really support people and the planet for next generation. So we're really counting on being able to kind of build on the work that you all are doing across Connecticut as you're tackling these issues and being able to sort of deliver a bigger positive impact for people who live in your community. And I think doing the hard work of building what I like to think of as a people-centered movement really will allow us to achieve kind of a just and equitable sort of approach to a future. And we saw the kind of you know, long-term planning and investment that really led to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act as a result of work that people had been doing for many years before. And I think looking at the work that's happening now across the country and how we can kind of make that come together so that we're, you know, delivering kind of good jobs and relief from pollution and other benefits is really kind of core to, I think, the work that we're doing. So just really hopeful that we can have more opportunities to sort of partner with local communities around, you know, how we organize, how we plan, how we strategize about what are the things that are going to be necessary in order to actually achieve I think the success that we're looking for. So I think your success and the kind of bold leadership that's occurring across Connecticut is just one example of how that combined with the work that we're doing can really benefit the American people. So I'll stop there and let you ask some questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much for those comments and the amazing support and whole government approach and focus on communities that have not been beneficiaries in the past resonates with all of the stuff we're trying to do on the ground here in Connecticut. So based on your connections here in Connecticut, you know, Sustainable CT focuses on actions that towns can take and municipal decisions. Obviously, taking the opportunity to receive some of this funding is a huge opportunity for our towns. Do you have other thoughts on specific ideas for leaders in Connecticut towns of how to help partner with you all or actually leverage points at municipal decision making?
Yeah, I mean, I think really like I think you'll see this as a theme in the way that at least I personally, and I think many in the administration sort of look at how we're tackling these issues. It is that collective effort. It is that our working together and sort of being focused on how we use our tools with your tools to actually have the the biggest impact on the public and on people. And I think, making reference to the dollars, I just want to give a couple of Connecticut specific examples for you all to have in mind and to think about is like, and what are other opportunities that may be similarly benefit the state. We've invested over $6 billion to upgrade Connecticut's infrastructure through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And that includes $100 million that are specifically dedicated to climate resilience, as well as $122 million that has been related to kind of clean energy efficiency, and power. And so, one of the things that I think is helpful as you're thinking about the areas within your municipality where there would be the greatest benefit from a particular scaling up of a project, or for example, an initiative that we launched last week called the Fresh Water Challenge, which is focused on like water and wetlands and protecting and restoring rivers. Like you have areas like that could benefit from federal support. I think this is a good time to sort of lift up those suggestions and think about ways in which we can partner with the federal government on achieving those benefits. The other thing I think is important that, and again, I know in places like Connecticut where there's real innovation occurring about what's necessary in order to make sure that the communities are actually taking advantage of the financial opportunities, is using your organizations, this one being an example, but your collective organization as a way to partner with people in my office, Council on Environmental Quality, with similar entities. If your issues are like more related to transportation, the Department of Transportation has engagement offices that really can be partners in thinking about how we make sure that some of the opportunities that are currently in front of us can be taken advantage of.
Excellent. Let's see, time goes fast, huh? Talking about all the great things that are happening. So on that topic, I mean, we've been focusing on the support structures, the coordination, the empowerment and opportunities provided by you and the federal team. It is a daunting topic, the fight against climate change. What gives you hope personally in doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what I feel like. There's I have a theme. What gives me hope is collective action. It gives me, it's like, to me, like, when I have a chance to actually travel across the country and I go into a community and I see the way in which they are energized around an investment that is now making something that might have been like a dim thought, a possibility, that gives me hope, because it's going to be, just given the way that the money is structured, it's going to be something that's impactful for that community. So I was in New Mexico, and it was a restoration project that was being done that has the benefit, in an area that experiences drought, of new ways in which they can kind of keep water in the system and take advantage of other water that's there. And as they described it to me, but for the funding that they received through the America the Beautiful Challenge, which is a grant program that is being run because of the Bipartisan Infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Act dollars, that this project would not have happened. And so that is very energizing for me, because there are many across the country, many communities where you've identified the things that need to happen, but finding the way to actually make them happen has been the challenge.
Excellent. We are actually, I know we told you we wouldn't take too much of your time this morning, and I see that the Senator has joined us. Any last comments you would like to make? before we invite Senator Blumenthal in?
Oh, absolutely. I just want to say thank you. And again, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for all the work that's going on across Connecticut to really take advantage of the opportunities we have. And hello, Senator. Always good to see you.
Hi.
Well, thank
Hi,
you,
Chairman Mallory. Very nice to see you.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Senator, and thank you so much, Chair Mallory. I think this conversation will certainly help us make better connections with your office, and we'll put some information in the follow-up email to folks about how to get in touch and forge those partnerships for collective action. Thank you for your inspiring message.
All right, take care.
Okay. Senator Blumenthal, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you.
Are a
Thanks
busy
to
person.
Sustainable Connecticut.
Yeah, great to have you here. I don't think you really need an introduction, but just a refresher to our 100 folks who are listening. 5 terms as previous Attorney General, 5 terms in the Senate. Yeah, and doing lots of great stuff for the environment, protecting Long Island Sound, rivers, streams. Staunch advocate for health and safety. We're just so grateful for all you do for Connecticut, and we're here to partner with you and listen about some more opportunities today. So we have some questions that folks submitted beforehand, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to start us off with anything you'd like to share. We've got mostly Connecticut municipal folks and elected officials, staff, residents on sustainability teams from all over the state who are working very diligently with great dedication in their towns to improve them and make them better places to live for all people. So I'll hand it over to you, Senator.
Well, first, thanks for having me, and thanks to Sustainable Connecticut for the great work that you're doing. You've heard me say, and I'll just repeat it, that the activism and advocacy at the local level and in our states is really where the biggest accomplishments happen. And so I want to thank all of the activists and advocates on this call and everybody who is contributing to the progress that we are making. And that's kind of the good news. Having worked on this issue for decades as Attorney General, enforcing the law, and now trying to change the law as a member of the United States Senate, I'm really encouraged by the progress in passing Save Our Seas 2.0, some of the other legislation that we have succeeded in approving on microplastic, microbeads, but there's still a long way to go on plastics, on sewerage, on a number of the other pollutants that we find in Connecticut's waters, but also in the soil and other areas, for example, PFAS, where again, we're making progress with the new rules that have been issued, but still a long way to go. And I am working on the Food Labeling Act, which would save our landfills from a lot of food that now is uneaten and discarded, and could be because it's right now somewhat deceptively labeled as having to be eaten within a certain period of time, and people misunderstand, throw it out instead of using it because it has been misleadingly labeled. And so I'm going to continue this work, and I apologize. I have to actually catch a plane to Washington in about an hour, so I'm somewhat limited in time, but I'm encouraged by the fact you have a really great roster of speakers today, and so I'm happy to be brief and answer your questions.
Yeah, so if you have time for a couple, you mentioned some of the legislation. There was a question that had come in about the Food Date Labeling Act, and specifically, what's the greatest obstacle in passing that?
Biggest obstacle is the industry. You know, take pesticides, for example, where we've worked very hard on the chemical that goes into Roundup, glyphosate, and we think we've made some progress, but the biggest obstacle in that legislation, as so many others, is the armies of lawyers and lobbyists that the industries are able to muster. And for them, it's a big source of revenue. So they have very high stake in it.
Yeah, that's the theme, I guess, in your work. How about, here's a question. It's a tricky one. Moving away from oil industry subsidies to sustainable energy industry subsidies, which some of that's happening. But would you care to address that?
It is happening. Solar particularly has become more and more prevalent. Obviously, we have some obstacles on wind. The companies that are investing in it, unfortunately, have encountered financial issues. Likewise, on solar, the industries are pretty volatile. But in the long run, on them, on electric vehicles, we're on the right side of history. It's going to take a while to do it, but consumers are going to go for electric vehicles once they're assured that the charging infrastructure is there. Wind and solar will prove to be financially viable after they reach a certain critical mass and the transmission and other distribution issues are addressed. So I think that the transition to sustainable, renewable power is one that is happening all around us, but we need to continue the tax credits and other incentives provided by the federal government in the most recent legislation that we passed, and other kinds of incentives, and even in some instances, we need to have more dramatic intervention in the markets.
Great. So I think I'll repeat a question we asked Chair Mallory, since you're talking to municipal decision makers mostly. So grateful for the work at the federal government, the importance of policy and tax implicate decisions and so on. But what would you say, do you have a message for municipal decision makers in Connecticut about their opportunities to address climate change and sustainability? What do you think the biggest opportunities are at the local level here in Connecticut?
You know, I think there are enormous opportunities at the local level along the coast. You know, what I've seen in some of the municipal actions is enormously encouraging with respect to the enforcement of certain restrictions on the dumping of sewerage, for example, and all around the state of Connecticut, open space and zoning actions to preserve open space. Once it's lost, it can't be recovered if it's developed. And, you know, I don't need to tell people about all the opportunities, but here is where I would focus in terms of just my personal perspective: continue the activism and advocacy at the state and federal levels. I'll give you just one example. Pesticides are used locally. There would be, I think, a pretty big appetite to restrict use of pesticides that can cause very serious damage to humans, as well as animals, wildlife. But there is a state law that preempts local law and bans municipalities from taking action against pesticides. I think that preemption provision, that ban or preclusion of local action, should be eliminated so that municipalities can exercise their power to protect their citizens. That's just one example of how state law can be changed to permit more local authority and more local action.
Excellent. Let's see, what else have we got in the questions here? Well, people had asked about the Break Free from Plastics Act, which you mentioned. Anything else to fill us in on that? Advocacy needed from folks in the audience, or Where do things stand at this moment?
I just want to thank everyone in Connecticut for being so environmentally conscious. And I'll just mention a sort of pet project of mine, Plum Island. Some of the folks on this call may not be aware of Plum Island. You know, hundreds of acres in the middle of Long Island Sound, totally undeveloped because it has hosted an animal research facility under the authority of the federal government. The federal government is moving that research facility to Kansas. It's a biological testing laboratory, and there'll have to be some cleanup at Plum Island, but then it offers a huge opportunity for environmental preservation. It's used by migrating birds. It's a home to all kinds of wildlife and vegetation, and could be a source of limited recreation, but mostly environmental preservation. Plum Island is high on my list of priorities. And of course, Long Island Sound in general is a huge resource that we need to preserve. But the streams and rivers that lead into Long Island Sound, that now have dams that prevent fish from migrating upward and reproducing. All of our environment really connects to everything else, as the people on this call knows. So every town and city has a role to play. Every one of you hosts a resource that contributes to all of the other resources, whether it's streams that flow into each other, air that can be polluted. You know, molecules of air don't really respect local boundaries. And so I think the interconnectedness of these resources is something that we in Connecticut understand, because we're a small state and we can continue to provide a model for the whole country. You've been at the forefront of this environmental effort, and thank you to Sustainable Connecticut.
Well, thank you so much. I know that you have to run. I'm going to impress your staff, and let's get you out of here early. The last quick thing you can address is the what gives you hope question. What inspires you about tackling the climate change crisis?
I'm sorry?
What last question is, what gives you hope that we can tackle this crisis of climate change?
What do I hope you can do?
What gives you hope? What inspires you? I mean, it's hard work. There's a lot of battles involved. Where do you get your inspiration and your hope for progress?
You know, I think, quite honestly, 2 points. First of all, my appreciation of the natural beauty of our state. I spend a lot of time traveling around the state on our roads and in our towns and cities. Please invite me to your events. I'm happy to visit. I love visiting. And so the beauty of our state inspires me, but also our children. As a parent, 4 children, one of them living in the state, the other 3 hopefully returning at some point. I really have a very strong sense of our mutual stewardship. We have a trust obligation. You know, every generation makes a compact with the next to leave the earth better than we found it. And I'm somewhat in doubt that we may do it in our generation, but we need to do better. And I think that sense of obligation to the generations that are going to follow us are very important. Now, I recognize also that the environment has economic implications. We are a small state, and the reason people come here is not because of our gold mines or oil wells. We don't have those natural resources. What we have is really smart people who appreciate the beauty of Connecticut and the accessibility to the sound, to all kinds of outdoor activities, to hiking and biking and pedestrian walking. And we need to make sure that it can be done safely and well for our economic self-interest, so that companies want to locate here and relocate and stay here. So I think it's a multifaceted sense of how important our environment is.
Thank you so much. We are going to let you go catch that plane to continue to do the important work, and we're so grateful for your service.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Have a great day. All right. So Representative Hayes, also a very busy person, is caught up in multiple votes on the floor, which is a great thing. So we don't want to stop her from doing the business that she's elected to do. So I think she may not make it. I'm going to just spend a little time updating you on some stuff that's going on at Sustainable CT. As you probably know, it's certification time. We had our spring certification deadline a couple weeks ago. Our partners have been actively reviewing submissions, as has the team here, doing a second round of reviews for quality control. We'll probably be ready to announce spring certification results in the next few weeks. Well before the end of May, I would say. And exciting to see all the stories and read about what you're all doing. As you know, there's another opportunity. Usually our larger submission time is in August for 2024 certification. So please let us know if we can support you at all as you're working on that. We have hired 11 fellows who will be starting on May 28th. And as you know, these fellows will be embedded in the offices of the councils of governments throughout the state. So they'll be close to your towns where you're used to meeting and able to help you with certification submissions for August, becoming more aware of the opportunities that are free and available to you from Sustainable CT, and all kinds of, support mechanisms and hands-on support. They're happy to meet with your sustainability committee or anything else like that. Another update, we just sent out a press release this morning. Our community match fund just passed $4 million in investment in community-led projects throughout the state. So that's an amazing milestone for us. And the really cool thing is that's almost $2 million matched by Sustainable CT to over 2 million crowdfunded. That's 21,000 people like you and me throughout the state that have made small donations and some larger donations to support a community-led projects, a community garden, a mural. We just had a really interesting project of a theater production to alert us and help us understand more about the complexities of racism in Clinton. We've got lots of live projects right now. Over 320 projects have been funded through this $4 million. So I'm gonna maybe someone from the team, Torin, could put the landing page for Patronacy in the chat. I encourage you to check out the projects that are happening in your town and throughout the state and see how you can support them, and think about your dream for your neighborhood or your community. What's something that you've thought could improve where you're living? And chances are it'll align with our broad roadmap here at Sustainable CT. We'll have a quick conversation on Zoom, hear your idea, set you up with a crowdfunding coach, help you get started on our crowdfunding platform to build your page, and then stick with you as you raise money. And we will, every dollar that you raise, we will contribute from Sustainable CT. So there are some fun things. I'm getting a message that Representative Hayes is rushing into our meeting right now and logging in. So thanks for your patience as I filled you in on some cool stuff happening here. And we will get started as soon as she joins us. Let's see. I'm going to just start with a little bit. You probably are familiar with Representative Hayes, but I'll do the quick introduction now. She represents the 5th District, was first elected to Congress in 2018. Her district is very large geographically and diverse. It spans from Canaan in the north to Danbury in the south, and New Britain in the east. Includes Waterbury, which is also her hometown, as it was Chair Mallory's. During her time in Congress, Jahana Hayes has focused on education, healthcare, labor, agriculture, veterans issues, and she's paid special attention to environmental issues as well. So we're especially happy that she's she's dividing her busy day to jump in for a few minutes with us. So I see her connecting to audio now. We'll give her a moment to catch her breath. And then we have some questions that you submitted that we can ask her. Congresswoman Hayes, you are a busy person and so good to make time for us. Welcome. I'm Lynn Stoddard with Sustainable CT.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm literally on the floor voting. I just stepped out in order to take the call.
You're wonderful. You're doing the important work, and we are very happy as you need to leave and run back in. So as you know, you're talking to, it's about 100 folks in Connecticut who are focused on sustainability in our towns and cities. And we're really excited to have you join us and your perspective as a Waterburyan. Yeah, so I'll open it up to you if you want to make any remarks, or I can just start with some questions that people submitted. What's your preference?
You can just start since
Okay.
we're the conversation, but thank you so much for doing this, because there's this assumption that people don't care about these issues. And I can tell you, in my district where I represent 41 towns, which span the spectrum of cities, rural communities, suburbs, this is top of mind. And the issues that we're discussing today are top of mind across all of those demographics. So thanks for having this conversation and pulling people together.
Of course. So I'm intrigued, as a former teacher, what do you see as the role of youth in addressing climate change and sustainability?
I think young people have done an amazing job of just making it clear that these are issues that are important to them, with everything from clean air and water to what the future of our country looks like. Their generation has really taken a leading role and really began to ask tough questions about, what will my future be like if we don't address these things now? I think that to ignore young people is to our peril, because they are the ones who are doing the hard work, who are really looking at this in a forward-thinking way. So inviting them into the conversations, letting them be leaders in not even movements, but these moments where we are saying, okay, what do we do next? And what does this look like? I am always impressed by their advocacy on these issues. Many of them share them out amongst their networks and in their friend groups. And it really is going to take, at every level, multi-generational conversations where people are being engaged. But I think that specifically that population, young people as a whole, are really doing more to amplify this work and have those conversations within their networks.
Yeah, we've got some exciting projects in Connecticut that we're helping support, that have been started by high school students in across the state, and it's just that's what gives me hope. And we asked that question of Senator Blumenthal. He said, yeah, the young people give him hope as well.
But I think the other thing that they do that I can appreciate, when I was in the classroom, I ran a community service club, and many of these young people are engaged in, citywide cleanups and cleaning up parks and rivers. And they really have decided that, what can I do right now? They don't, everything is not super big picture. Everything isn't about federal legislation or having all of the money to make all of the changes that we need. I think young people are also focused on, instead of complaining, what can I do right now today using my agency and my advocacy? And they're finding really creative ways to do those things, everything from organizing these community efforts to protect our environment, to clean up in their community, at every level, recycling, anything that they can do to contribute to this effort. And it really is a reminder for people. You don't have to be at the point where you can pull all of the levers of power, but if a true commitment starts with asking yourself, what can I do right now today? And that's what young people are doing.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of taps into a theme that Chair Mallory was sharing of collective action and needing these efforts to come from everywhere. So related to that, we have a lot of municipal decision makers and folks pushing municipal decisions towards sustainability in the audience. Any thoughts you have on, advice or the role you might think that towns have in addressing climate change and sustainability, and thoughts on that?
I think so. One of the things I often hear from people is a lot of the costs associated with transitioning or pivoting or creating plans around sustainability are daunting for many communities. So, and being aware of any federal investments or grants or things that can give you access to capital so that these programs are more sustainable. You mentioned Waterbury, which is the biggest city in my district, and we've done a lot of work around, through the EPA with brownfields and remediation and cleanup. So really being in touch with your federal leaders just to see what is out there, what assistance is available with some of the startup costs, but also having it as a part of whatever your blueprint is, whatever your budget is, what in your local municipalities, what is your long-term goal and how do you plan to achieve that? Many of these efforts are going to take time. It is really going to require intentional decision-making at the municipal level. So making that a part of the work that you're doing. And I can give an example. I see that a lot here in Congress, where 5 years ago, some of these efforts around sustainability seemed like an afterthought. And now, at the point where we are considering legislation or even drafting legislation, we are talking about what is the long-term effect of these decisions. What will that mean for this area? And what are we trying to, what's the goal that we're trying to meet? Actually, today, many of the votes that we are taking are on this very issue, protecting our national parks, some of our reserves. What does energy drilling look like? So if municipalities are thinking, how do we, if we are already cleaning up a site or preparing a building to bring in a business, how do we make sure we are using sustainable materials? How do we make sure we are using the highest energy efficiency? How do we make sure we are incorporating charger stations as we are retrofitting things and looking forward? I think once we start to make those incremental steps and build out the infrastructure around sustainability, we'll see a lot more people begin to have a better understanding of what that means. But it has to be embedded in legislation. It has to be a part of the budgets that are written and not merely seen as an afterthought.
Absolutely. How are we doing on time?
6 minutes.
Well, I hope you get a chance to take a breath every once in a while. Let's talk a little bit about the intersection between environmental justice and its importance in the sustainability movement. I know Justice 40 we heard about also from Chair Mallory. It's a big focus of the Biden administration. Any comments you want to make on that and what you've seen be successful and where we may be falling behind and have more opportunities to do that better?
So this is a conversation that comes up a lot in my district. There are lots of for instance, land trust throughout the 5th district, and a huge effort around conservation and protecting open spaces, making sure that the rivers, the Farmington River, the Housatonic River, we are protecting the wild and scenic ecosystem. And oftentimes when I go into those areas, I kind of pivot the conversation to let them know that these things are equally as important to people who live in the cities. When we have students where in the inner city where the highest rate of absenteeism is from asthma-related illnesses, where we are talking about diesel school buses idling in communities, where we are talking about during COVID, many of these communities having no open spaces or walking trails, and really having just borne witness to decades of blighted buildings that were left from a manufacturing age that's long gone. People really start to understand that this is all of our problem. And when we talk about climate resilience and sustainability, even when I go into some of my farming and rural communities, many of my farmers are talking about, how do we address, extreme weather events? How are we making sure that we can have climate resistant seeds and soil and all, just many things. So no matter what area it is, although they have very specific needs, there's a through line. And that's where climate justice comes into place, because we have to remind ourselves that everyone deserves access to clean water. Everyone deserves access to air that their children can breathe safely. Everyone deserves access to having the resources and the preventative steps so that they don't have to deal with extreme weather conditions. And really, again, being thoughtful and intentional about when we have legislation that we are addressing some of those areas of need. Something as simple as I just co-sponsored a piece of legislation to plant trees in the cities. Most of our inner cities are, I think it's about 7 degrees hotter because there's no shade cover. Many of our public housing projects have no trees. So just really thinking about this in a way that recognizes the dignity of all people and how their relationship to their environment, to their community, to climate justice is so important. And again, being intentional in our decision-making efforts. There might be people who say, well, why do you care about planting trees in public housing projects? First of all, kids should have trees around, but the idea that these places are 7-8 degrees hotter. And when we have these long, hot summers and extreme weather conditions, the same way you would want to be able to walk and be out in open spaces in other areas, our inner cities need that same level of attention. It's one of the reasons I fought so hard for clean school bus funding to go to some of our most affected areas, the communities where I knew that kids were riding on these buses and breathing in those fumes. And it's been just such a pleasure to work with the EPA and Mallory specifically, because she's from the same area as me, so she gets it. I mean, you have the conversation and there's an immediate understanding of addressing the needs of the people who are sometimes even more affected because there's been so much disinvestment over time. But we have to think about how these issues affect people from every background and every community.
Thank you. We probably have time for one quick one. So this might be a tricky one. I was asking the others what gives them hope in the climate crisis, but I think I'm going to change that a little bit. Maybe you could give us a glimmer of hope on bipartisan support towards climate change and sustainability, if you're seeing any light in that area. Because we hear a lot of negative news, of course.
I can tell you that I do have hope in this area. I have lots of hope. When I first came to Congress, I've been here 5 years, there wasn't a lot of conversation around these initiatives. And whenever people talked about it, it was like, this is the most extreme members of the party. And now, once again, like I said, we see climate legislation that pays attention to climate smart initiatives embedded in everything that we do. You know, when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, it was the first of its kind investments in some of these climate initiatives. When the infrastructure bill has consideration for climate initiatives. We are talking about workforce development and training in clean energy sectors. So lots of things that even 5 years ago we weren't talking about are now critical and central to all of the legislation that we pass. As far as bipartisan collaboration, I think that really is up to the people who are paying attention on calls like this and are tapped into these conversations. Representation matters. You know, electing people who believe in these issues and will champion these efforts and will really push to make sure that we are passing legislation that responds to these needs. Like I said, this week we have a series of legislation that is, you know, attempting to take us back on many of these issues. So just paying attention and making sure that your elected representatives know the things that you care about. I've seen the needle move. I continue to see it move. We would have never been able to pass all of the climate initiatives that we passed without just a majority of members who believed in this type of work. Moving forward, we have a farm bill that we have to pass, and a lot of the what we're pushing for in the farm bill will address some of these same climate initiatives. And those are not coming from legislators to the people. That's what we're hearing from our local farmers. These are the things that they're saying that they need to do in order to be sustainable. It just makes good economic and business sense. So I guess just continuing to educate people and having public sentiment around the need to do things differently. A lot of the challenges that we have with climate today are a result of the efforts or the lack of effort that we had in generations past and not paying attention to the way we treated our environment. So really making sure that we don't repeat those same mistakes. But I am hopeful on this topic because one of the first pieces of legislation that I introduced when I came into Congress was, again, this is the fourth time I've mentioned it, the Clean School Bus Act, that piece of legislation, which I couldn't even get consideration on the floor that first year. And then to see billions of dollars in investment in year 4, that happens because we are moving in a direction where people recognize that we have to pay attention, not only pay attention, but we have to make those necessary investments to make sure that we are at least slowing down the damage that has been done to our environment, to make sure that we have a world that is sustainable for our children and our future.
Thank you so much for your leadership and for sharing with us and giving us hope as well. We're so grateful. Let us know how we can help and support you, and good luck with the rest of your day.
Thank you. Guys, have a great day. And thank you for doing this again, for really amplifying this conversation. It's so important.
Thank you. All right. So we are a little bit past 1, and thank you so much for joining us. Torin will be sending out the recording later on at some point, and I think we're ready for a wrap, right, T?
Sounds
All
good.
right. Happy Earth Day again. Continue it every day, and follow these great people who are doing the hard work in Washington. Thanks, everyone.